When I was little, my mom forced me to badmouth my dad and secretly recorded it, then used that audio in court to destroy his life and get custody. But now she's married again and having marriage problems, and she wants me to fix them. I was 12 when my parents sat me down and told me I had to choose between them. They made it sound so casual, both sitting across from me at the kitchen table. My dad was fiddling with his wedding ring like it was a toy. "You should be happy you're getting to pick. Most kids don't get that kind of privilege," my mom said, like this was some kind of gift. "Just pick who you feel happiest with." My dad gave a weak nod, looking like there was something they weren't telling me. "No pressure, buddy. We love you no matter what." That night I couldn't sleep. I laid there going over every little memory I had. It didn't feel like picking a parent. It felt like passing some huge test I wasn't ready for. In the days after that, little things started changing. Mom started casually slipping comments into breakfast conversations. Things like, "Did your dad get angry at the dog again? He's been so grumpy lately." Dad started doing the same thing, telling me things like, "Have you ever noticed how mean mom can get when you say no to her?" It felt like they were tugging in opposite directions. After a lot of crying in bathroom stalls at school, I finally picked my mom. It wasn't dramatic. I liked our neighborhood better. Mom worked from home. When I told Dad, my voice was shaking, but he hugged me so tight, whispering it was okay, because he just wanted me to be happy. It almost felt worse because he was being so nice about it. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not because I thought I'd picked wrong, but because he made it feel okay to let him go. Things seemed fine until a week later. A guy in a blue polo shirt knocked on our door asking for me by name. He handed me an envelope, turned around and walked away. Mom quickly grabbed it off me, smiling nervously and telling me it was just paperwork. But later that night, I overheard her on the phone. She was laughing about how the recordings had worked, and Dad never saw it coming. Confused, I started snooping around. That's how I found the recordings. Turns out, every time she had asked me something about how Dad gets angry, she was secretly audio recording my responses. I didn't understand why at the time, but these audio recordings were mentioned in court every time we went. My dad never came to court to fight it either. He didn't call, didn't write, just vanished from my life overnight. I still didn't understand at the time, but a year later, I overheard Mom again. She wasn't laughing this time. Her voice was irritated. "He wanted to still see him," she said angrily, "but there was no way I was going to split weekends and pretend everything was fine." That's when I realized it wasn't some judge who took Dad away. It was her. It was the recordings she had manipulated me in. Not long after that, Dad moved out of state. He started getting threats for being abusive to me and was forced to change his number and disappear completely. My mom hammered it into me that he'd just left us, that he'd abandoned me. Eventually, even I started believing it, until guilt started keeping me awake at night. It crept in slowly and quietly, but it was always there. The day I turned 18, I finally messaged him. It was a short, shaky text. "Hi Dad, it's me. Can we talk?" He replied within a minute, like he'd been waiting all those years. "I didn't think you'd ever want to." He drove for 15 hours that same day, and we met for coffee the next afternoon. He cried before he even said hello, and I realized I'd never seen him cry before. He told me he'd thought I hated him, that I believed all of Mom's lies. As I told him the truth about the recordings, he just nodded, telling me he knew what she did, but when he tried to fight it, he found out just how cruel family courts are to men. 2 years later, it was Mom's second wedding. I stood beside her, smiling in every photo, adjusting her veil, holding her bouquet. I walked her down the aisle because she asked me to, but as soon as the ceremony was over, I turned to Mom and told her I wasn't staying for reception. I was going to have dinner with Dad. Her eyes went wide with shock, and she damn near exploded. She started tearing up and causing a scene so big I had to call my dad for help. The carefully applied makeup began to streak as she demanded to know why I would ruin her special day. I still remember how my hands shook while dialing his number. Dad showed up 20 minutes later, standing awkwardly at the edge of the venue in his best suit, the one he'd bought specially for this meeting. Mom's new husband, Greg, tried to play peacemaker. He was a decent guy, always kind to me, but completely in the dark. He didn't know our history. Nobody at the wedding did. Mom had crafted this perfect narrative about my troubled father who abandoned us. I watched her face change when she saw Dad walking toward us. First shock, then anger, then this weird calculated smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Anthony, what a surprise," she said, all sugar sweet for the crowd gathering around us. "I didn't think you'd be in town." Dad just nodded politely. He wasn't there to fight. I grabbed my jacket and told Mom I'd see her tomorrow. That's when she grabbed my arm, her nails digging in, leaving little half-moon impressions in my skin. "You're embarrassing me," she whispered. "This is my wedding day." I pulled away and walked to Dad's car. The whole drive to the restaurant was quiet, just the sound of the radio playing softly in the background. We ended up at this little diner he used to take me to when I was a kid. The same red vinyl booths, the same jukebox in the corner. Over burgers, Dad finally opened up about everything. He showed me the threatening texts Mom's brother Kyle had sent him years ago, showed me the restraining order Mom had filed using those manipulated recordings. He explained how he'd tried to fight it at first, but Mom had turned everyone against him. Neighbors, teachers, even my grandparents. His own parents had died believing he was some kind of monster. "I thought about kidnapping you," he admitted, staring into his coffee. Just taking you and running. But what kind of life would that be? Always looking over our shoulders? I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed at Dad's hotel, tossing and turning on the pull-out couch. Around 3 a.m., my phone exploded with texts from Mom. She wanted to know where I was, demanded I come home immediately. The messages grew increasingly frantic, alternating between guilt trips and threats. I turned my phone off and stared at the ceiling, watching headlights from passing cars create moving patterns on the wall. The next morning, I went back to Mom's house to grab some clothes. She was waiting for me, sitting at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. She asked if I'd had a nice dinner, all casual, stirring her tea with measured movements. I nodded, grabbing my stuff quickly. Then she dropped the bomb. Your father unalived someone, you know. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. A boy named Josh, hammered driving accident when he was 19. That's why I couldn't let him have custody. I froze, backpack half zipped. Mom smiled like she'd won something. I left without saying anything and called Dad immediately. He sighed when I asked him about Josh. Turns out there was an accident, but Dad wasn't driving. He was in the car with his cousin who hit a tree. Nobody died. Josh had a broken arm and some cuts. Mom had twisted another truth, reshaping reality to fit her narrative. Over the next few days, I started digging through old boxes in Mom's attic. I found divorce papers, old journals, letters Dad had written me that Mom never gave me, dozens of them, still in their original envelopes, some with small gifts or photos enclosed. I discovered that Mom had been planning the divorce for years, methodically building a case against Dad. She'd even coached me as a kid, asking leading questions about Dad's anger issues that I now realized were completely normal parental moments. I confronted her with what I'd found. We were in the kitchen, and she was making dinner like it was any other Tuesday. I put the letters on the counter, and her face went pale. Mom's mask slipped then. She told me I was ungrateful, that she'd protected me from a man who would have ruined my life. She actually believed it too. In her mind, she was the hero of this story. That night, I packed more of my things and moved in with Dad temporarily. He'd rented an apartment nearby, planning to stay until he figured out his next steps. We spent hours talking, piecing together the puzzle of my childhood. Dad showed me photos I'd never seen, told me stories Mom had rewritten in her version of our family history. The most shocking discovery came when Dad's sister Rebecca called. She hadn't spoken to him in years, believing Mom's stories, but she'd recently found old emails that made her question everything. She apologized to Dad over speakerphone, crying as she admitted she should have known better. Your mom was always good at making people believe her version of things, Rebecca told me. Even back in high school, she'd twist stories until black looked white. I started reaching out to other family members, old neighbors, anyone who might have pieces of the truth. Some wouldn't talk to me. Others shared stories that confirmed what I was learning. Mom had systematically isolated Dad, then me, controlling the narrative with surgical precision. I started going through the letters that night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of Dad's sparse apartment. There were birthday cards I'd never received, Christmas presents he'd mailed that I never saw. In one envelope from when I was 14, I found tickets to a baseball game that had long since passed. Dad sat beside me, not saying much, just watching as I pieced together the alternate timeline of my life, the one where he hadn't abandoned me. She kept all of these from me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Every single one. Dad nodded, rubbing his hand across his face. I thought you were getting them and just not responding. After a while, I stopped sending them. I found a small notebook in the bottom of the box. It was Mom's handwriting, dated entries going back to before their divorce. Reading it made my stomach turn. She'd documented every minor argument, every time Dad raised his voice, every perceived slight, but twisted into something sinister. Normal disagreements became violent outbursts. Dad being tired after work became emotional neglect. It was methodical, calculated. Did you know she was doing this? I asked, holding up the notebook. Dad shook his head. I knew something was off. She'd pick fights over nothing, then lock herself in the bedroom for hours. I thought she was just unhappy with me. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls from Mom. I listened to the first voicemail, her voice sickly sweet, asking where I was, saying she was worried. By the 10th message, she was screaming, calling me ungrateful, threatening to call the police and report me missing. The last few were just sobbing. I texted her that I was fine and staying with Dad for a while. She replied instantly, "He's manipulating you. Come home now." Dad and I spent the day making a plan. I needed to get the rest of my stuff from Mom's house, but we both knew she wouldn't make it easy. We decided to go when she'd be at work, using the spare key I still had. Simple enough, right? Wrong. When we pulled up to the house, Mom's car was in the driveway. She'd called in sick, probably waiting for me to show up. Dad stayed in the car while I went to the door alone. No sense triggering her right away. Mom opened the door before I could even knock. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she smiled like nothing was wrong. "I knew you'd come home," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like a trap. I kept things brief, told her I just needed some clothes and my laptop for school. She followed me upstairs, hovering in my doorway as I packed. When I pulled out my duffel bag from the closet, she asked where I was going. "I'm staying with Dad for a bit," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just need some space to think." Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by something cold. "He's poisoning you against me," she said. "After everything I've done for you." I kept packing, not taking the bait. That's when she grabbed my arm, her nails digging in just like at the wedding. "You're not going anywhere with him." I pulled away, harder than I meant to. She stumbled back, catching herself on my desk. For a second, I saw something calculating in her eyes. Then she let out a wail and dropped to the floor, clutching her wrist. You hurt me, she screamed. Just like your father used to. I froze, suddenly understanding what was happening. She was creating another scene, another story she could twist later. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Mom, I barely touched you. You grabbed me first. I'm recording this so you can't lie about it later. Her eyes widened. She wasn't used to being challenged. She got up quickly, brushing herself off. The injury forgotten. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this needs to stop. Your father is dangerous. I finished packing while she followed me around, switching between threats and pleas. When I headed for the door, she blocked my way. If you leave with him, don't bother coming back. I pushed past her, duffel bag over my shoulder. Dad was waiting in the car, engine running. I threw my bag in the back seat and climbed in. As we pulled away, I saw Mom on the front lawn, phone to her ear, watching us go. She's probably calling the police, I said, telling them you kidnapped me or something. Dad nodded grimly. Wouldn't be the first time. We drove straight to the police station. Dad said it was better to get ahead of whatever story Mom was spinning. The officer at the desk looked bored as I explained I was 18, staying with my father voluntarily, and concerned my mother might file a false report. He took some notes, nodded, and said they'd make a record of it. As we were leaving, Dad's phone rang. It was Greg, Mom's new husband. Dad put him on speaker. Look, I don't know what's going on, Greg said, sounding stressed, but Catherine is hysterical. She says Anthony attacked her and kidnapped you. I leaned toward the phone. Greg, that's not what happened. I'm 18. I'm with Dad because I want to be. Mom tried to stop me from leaving and made up a story about me hurting her. There was a long pause. Yeah, that actually makes more sense. She's been acting strange ever since the wedding. Obsessive about where you are, who you're with. Has she always been like this? Dad asked. Another pause. Not at first, but lately, yeah. She goes through my phone, accuses me of lying about small things. I thought it was just wedding stress. After we hung up, Dad looked worried. She's escalating, he said. We need to be careful. That night, I got a text from my friend Joe. Mom had called his parents, telling them Dad was dangerous, and they shouldn't let me stay at their house. She'd done the same with all my friends. She was cutting off my escape routes, one by one. The next day, I went to my university to sort out housing. With Dad's help, I applied for emergency on-campus housing, explaining my situation to the student services coordinator. She was sympathetic, but said there was a waiting list. The best she could do was put me at the top of it. When we got back to Dad's apartment, the manager was waiting for us. There had been a complaint about an unauthorized tenant, me. Dad's lease only allowed for one occupant. Someone had called the building owner directly. 3 guesses who, Dad muttered, as we went upstairs to grab my things. We were running out of options. Dad's sister Rebecca offered to let me stay with her, but she lived 2 hours away, and I had classes. We finally decided on a cheap, extended stay hotel near campus. Not ideal, but it would work until my housing came through. As Dad helped me check in, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Kyle, Mom's brother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. You need to stop this, he said without preamble. Your mom is falling apart. She's been lying to me my whole life, I said. About Dad, about everything. Kyle sighed. Look, your dad isn't the saint you think he is. Did he tell you about the restraining order his ex-girlfriend filed before he met your mom? Or the anger management classes he took? My stomach dropped. I looked at Dad, who was filling out the hotel paperwork. What are you talking about? Ask him about Judith, Kyle said. Ask him why she moved across the country to get away from him. After I hung up, I couldn't shake Kyle's words. Dad noticed something was wrong and asked what happened. I told him what Kyle had said. Dad sat heavily on the hotel bed. I dated Judith in college. It was toxic. We brought out the worst in each other. We'd fight, break up, get back together. After one really bad fight, she filed a restraining order. It was temporary, dropped after 30 days when she calmed down. And yeah, I took anger management classes, voluntarily, because I didn't like who I was becoming in that relationship. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because it was 25 years ago, and I was ashamed, he said simply. I worked hard to change. By the time I met your mom, I was different. I believed him, but the seed of doubt was planted. That's what Mom was good at, creating just enough uncertainty to make you question everything. The next day, I went to campus early to study before class. When I came out of the library, Mom was waiting by my car. My heart sank. I considered turning around, but she'd already seen me. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady. She looked put together, nothing like the hysterical woman from a few days ago. Just hear me out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to get coffee at the campus cafe. It was public, safe. Mom was calm as she stirred her latte, explaining that she was worried about me, that Dad had always been good at seeming charming and reasonable. Did he tell you about Judith? She asked, echoing Kyle's words so precisely, I knew they'd coordinated. Yes, I said. He told me everything. Mom raised an eyebrow. Did he tell you she was hospitalized after their last fight? My blood went cold. What? Broken ribs, Mom said, her voice soft with fake concern. She dropped the charges because she was scared of him. I stood up, nearly knocking over my coffee. I don't believe you. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. It was yellowed with age, a small article about a domestic violence incident. Judith's name was there, Dad's too. I'm not showing you this to hurt you, Mom said. I'm trying to protect you, like I always have. I took the clipping and left without another word. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely drive. I called Rebecca from the parking lot. Did you know about Judith? I asked when she answered. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Yes, she finally said, but not the version Catherine probably told you. According to Rebecca, Judith had been the violent one in the relationship. She'd thrown things at Dad, hit him, even stabbed him with scissors once. The final fight happened when Dad tried to leave her. She attacked him, He pushed her away in self-defense, and she fell against the coffee table. The broken ribs were real, but the circumstances were different. The police initially arrested your dad because that's what happens in domestic calls, Rebecca explained. But the charges were dropped after witnesses came forward. Judith's roommate confirmed she was the aggressor. Why would Mom keep a newspaper clipping about it? I asked. Because the follow-up story never ran, Rebecca said. The initial article made your dad look guilty. It was perfect ammunition. I drove to the hotel in a daze. Dad was at work, so I had time to think. The newspaper clipping was real, but it told only part of the story, the part that fit Mom's narrative, just like she'd done with the recordings, with Josh, with everything. I called Joe and asked if I could crash at his place for the night. I needed space to clear my head. He agreed immediately, saying his parents knew Mom was lying. They'd known our family for years and never believed Dad was abusive. That night, Joe and I dug deeper. We found Judith on social media. She was married, living in Seattle. On a whim, I sent her a message, explaining who I was and asking about my dad. I didn't expect a response, but 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Anthony was never abusive, Judith said after introducing herself. I was the problem. I had untreated bipolar disorder and would fly into rages. The newspaper got it wrong, and I set the record straight, but by then, no one cared about a correction. My mom kept the original article all these years, I said. Judith sighed. That doesn't surprise me. Your mom contacted me right after she started dating Anthony. She had all these questions about our relationship. I thought it was weird, but I told her the truth, that I was the one who messed up. She seemed disappointed. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Mom had been looking for dirt on Dad from the very beginning. She'd been planning her exit strategy before they even got married. The next morning, I went back to the hotel to talk to Dad. He was sitting at the small desk, looking at apartments on his laptop. He'd decided to stay in town, to be close to me. When I told him about my conversation with Judith, he looked relieved. I should have told you everything up front, he said. I just didn't want to dump all this old drama on you at once. I get it, I said. But no more secrets, okay? Mom thrives on secrets. Dad nodded. No more secrets. Over the next week, things escalated. Mom showed up at my classes. She called my professors, claiming family emergency situations to get me pulled out of lectures. She even went to my part-time job at the campus bookstore, causing such a scene that my manager suggested I take some time off. The final straw came when she somehow got a key to my hotel room. I came back from class to find her sitting on my bed, going through my laptop. She'd read my emails, my messages with Dad, everything. What the hell, Mom? I said, grabbing my computer from her. How did you even get in here? She smiled, that calculated smile. I told the front desk I was your mother and had forgotten something important. People are so helpful when you're upset. I called hotel security, who escorted her out. She went quietly, too quietly. That night, I applied for a restraining order of my own. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 days later, I got a call from Greg. He sounded shaken. I think you should know, your mom has been recording our conversations and taking pictures of my text messages when I leave my phone unattended. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Building a case, Greg said, just like she did with your dad. I found a notebook where she's documenting every disagreement. Every time I come home late from work, she's twisting everything. You need to get out, I told him. Trust me on this. Greg was quiet for a moment. There's something else. I found old recordings of her conversations with you, from years ago. She has them labeled and organized. Some are edited, parts cut out or rearranged. My blood ran cold. Can you get copies? Already did, Greg said. I'll send them to you. The recordings arrived via email that night. I listened with Dad, both of us silent as my childhood voice played through the speakers. Mom asking leading questions. Me, giving innocent answers that, taken out of context, sounded damning. And then the edits, subtle but clear, when you knew what to listen for. My dad yelled at the TV during the game became just Dad yelled, with the context cut out. This is what she used in court, Dad said, his voice hollow. This is why I lost you. The next day, I met with a lawyer Rebecca recommended. She reviewed the recordings, the newspaper clipping, everything we'd gathered. She was blunt in her assessment. What your mother did was parental alienation, she said. It's a form of child abuse. The manipulated recordings could constitute fraud on the court, but proving it all these years later would be difficult. I don't want to sue her or anything, I said. I just want her to leave us alone. The lawyer nodded. The restraining order will help with that, but people like your mother don't usually just stop. They escalate until they're forced to stop. She was right. The day after I was granted a temporary restraining order, Mom created a new Instagram account dedicated to exposing Dad. She posted old photos, out-of-context quotes, the newspaper clipping about Judith. She tagged my friends, my university, Dad's workplace. Dad's boss called him in for a meeting. Thankfully, Dad had already explained the situation, and they were supportive. But it was embarrassing, having our family drama splashed across social media for everyone to see. I finally got assigned on-campus housing, a small single dorm that felt like a sanctuary. Dad helped me move in, both of us looking over our shoulders the whole time, half expecting Mom to appear. That night, I got a text from Greg. He'd moved out while Mom was at work, taking only what he needed. He was staying with a friend until he figured out next steps. Be careful, his message ended. She's not taking this well. The next morning, I woke up to find my car vandalized in the campus parking lot. Someone had keyed the word liar across the driver's side door. There were no cameras in that section of the lot, but I knew who did it. The campus police took a report, but without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I was starting to feel trapped. Mom seemed to be everywhere, outside my dorm, in the parking lot, at the campus coffee shop. Always just far enough away to not violate the restraining order, but close enough to let me know she was watching. Dad suggested I stay with Rebecca for a while, just to get some distance. I was about to agree when I got a call from the student housing office. Someone had reported substance use in my dorm room. They needed to conduct a search. I knew my room was clean, so I agreed to the search. The housing director and campus security went through everything while I stood in the doorway, watching. They found nothing, of course. As they were leaving, the director mentioned that the report had come from my mother, who'd claimed to be concerned about my new living situation. That was the last straw. I called a lawyer again, explaining everything that had happened. She suggested we go back to court to make the restraining order permanent and expand its terms to include no contact of any kind, direct or indirect. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, I stayed with Dad, both of us jumping at every noise, checking the locks twice before bed. We were prisoners in our own lives, all because Mom couldn't stand to lose control. The night before the hearing, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply, truth. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but curiosity got the better of me. It was from Mom's sister, Victoria, who I hadn't seen in years. She'd had a falling out with Mom long before the divorce. The email was brief. I heard what's happening from Kyle. This isn't the first time Catherine has done this. Ask your dad about Scott. I showed Dad the email. His face went pale. Scott was your mom's first husband, he said quietly. She never told you about him because it didn't fit her narrative of me being her only failed marriage. According to Dad, Mom had been married briefly in her early 20s to a guy named Scott. She'd done the same thing to him, isolated him, manipulated situations, recorded conversations without consent. When he tried to leave, she accused him of abuse. He lost his job, his friends, everything. How do you know all this? I asked. Scott contacted me during our divorce, Dad said. He'd heard through mutual friends what was happening. He tried to warn me, but by then it was too late. Your mom had already set everything in motion. I emailed Victoria back, asking if she could put me in touch with Scott. She replied with his phone number adding, be prepared. What happened to him was worse than what happened to your dad. I called Scott the next morning. He was hesitant at first, clearly wary of being pulled back into Mom's orbit. But once I explained the situation, he opened up. The patterns were identical. The secret recordings, the twisted narratives, the isolation tactics. But in Scott's case, Mom had taken it a step further. She'd planted evidence, making it look like he was having an affair. When he denied it, she used that as proof of his dishonesty. The worst part, Scott said, his voice tired, was that I started to believe her version of events. She was so convincing, so certain. I thought maybe I was crazy. Maybe I had done all these things and somehow forgotten. I knew exactly what he meant. Mom's greatest weapon was her absolute conviction in her own lies. She believed them so completely that you started to doubt your own reality. Scott agreed to write a statement for our court hearing. Victoria did too. By the time we were ready to go to court, we had a small army of witnesses to Mom's pattern of behavior. Scott, Victoria, Greg, Judith, even some of my friends who'd seen her manipulation firsthand. The morning of the hearing, I felt strangely calm. For the first time, I wasn't facing Mom's lies alone. I had the truth on my side, and people willing to stand up for it. As Dad and I walked into the courthouse, I spotted Mom sitting on a bench in the hallway. She was dressed conservatively, her face a mask of maternal concern. When she saw me, she started to approach, but stopped when she noticed the bailiff watching. Instead, she mouthed, "I love you," with tears in her eyes. I turned away, ready to finally tell my story. The hearing was pretty much what I expected. Mom showed up with this lawyer who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a month. She played the concerned mother role perfectly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, speaking in this soft, wounded voice that made me sound like the villain. The judge seemed sympathetic at first, which made my stomach drop. When it was my turn to speak, I just laid everything out. The recordings, the manipulation, the way she'd isolated me from Dad for years. I showed the judge the edited audio files Greg had sent me, pointing out where Mom had cut and spliced my words to make Dad sound abusive. The judge's expression changed as he listened, his eyebrows drawing together. Scott testified next. He was nervous, but solid, describing the exact same patterns I'd experienced. Then Victoria spoke, explaining how she'd watched her sister do this multiple times. Greg had sent a written statement since he couldn't get off work, detailing how Mom had started doing the same things to him. Mom's lawyer tried to paint it as some conspiracy against her, but the evidence was too strong. When the judge asked Mom directly about the edited recordings, she fumbled. First, she denied they were edited, then claimed she'd only cleaned them up to make them clearer. The judge wasn't buying it. In the end, the restraining order was made permanent. Mom was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me and Dad, with no contact of any kind, not even through third parties. As we left the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of her face. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes were cold, calculating. I knew this wasn't over. For a few weeks, things were quiet, too quiet. I moved back into my dorm, started focusing on classes again. Dad found a small apartment nearby and was looking for a better job. We had dinner together twice a week, slowly rebuilding our relationship. It felt almost normal. Then the emails started. They came from different addresses each time, but I knew they were from Mom. They started off apologetic, how she only wanted what was best for me, how she'd made mistakes but deserved another chance. When I didn't respond, they turned nasty. She called me ungrateful, brainwashed, a traitor. I forwarded them to our lawyer and tried to ignore them. One night, I came back to my dorm to find a package outside my door. No postage, just my name scrawled across the top. Inside was a framed photo of me and Mom from when I was little, along with a birthday card she'd kept from when I was 7. I'd drawn a picture of us together and written, "Best Mom Ever," in crayon. It was a guilt trip wrapped in nostalgia. I called Dad, feeling shaken. He suggested I report it to campus security since Mom had clearly been in my building. They took a report, but didn't seem too concerned. Just a mom leaving a gift for her kid, they figured. They didn't understand what we were dealing with. A few days later, my academic advisor called me into her office. Someone had emailed the department claiming I was plagiarizing my papers. They'd launched an investigation. I knew immediately who was behind it. Thankfully, I had drafts and notes for all my work, and the investigation was dropped quickly, but it was stressful, embarrassing, and exactly the kind of thing Mom would do to regain control. The final straw came when Dad's car was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but all his personal papers were rifled through. The same night, someone tried to access my bank account online, triggering a security alert. The attempts were coming from Mom's IP address. We filed police reports, but without concrete proof it was her, there wasn't much they could do. I was starting to feel that same trapped feeling again. Mom was finding ways to mess with us while staying just within legal boundaries. The restraining order wasn't enough. We needed to be more proactive. Dad suggested we meet with a different kind of professional, a security consultant who specialized in stalking cases. The guy, Charlie, was ex-military with this no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. He came to Dad's apartment and did a security assessment, pointing out vulnerabilities we hadn't even considered. "Your mom's playing psychological warfare," Charlie told me bluntly. "She wants you off balance, scared, always looking over your shoulder. The best defense is to secure what you can and document everything else." Charlie helped us set up better security, new locks, a simple camera system for Dad's apartment, password changes for all our accounts. He suggested I get a P.O. box for mail and be more careful about my routines on campus. Small changes that would make it harder for Mom to interfere. Most importantly, he told us to document every single incident, no matter how small. "Build your case," he said. "If she violates the restraining order, you need proof." The documentation became almost a ritual. Dad and I had a shared online folder where we recorded everything: the emails, the package, the plagiarism accusation, the car break-in, dates, times, details. It felt good to have some control, to be doing something proactive instead of just reacting. About a month after the hearing, I ran into Kyle at a coffee shop near campus. I almost walked out when I saw him, but he caught my eye and waved me over. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said, when I reluctantly sat down. "I believed Catherine because she's my sister. I didn't want to think she could do the things you were saying." I just nodded, not sure what to say. Kyle had been one of Mom's biggest defenders, the one who'd tried to plant doubts about Dad. "She's not well," he continued, staring into his coffee. "I'm starting to see that now. The things she's saying, the way she's obsessing over you, it's not normal." Kyle explained that Mom had been staying with him since Greg left. At first, he'd been sympathetic, but her behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. She stayed up all night monitoring my social media, creating fake accounts to follow me after I'd blocked her. She had a wall in her room covered with photos of me, news clippings about Dad, printouts of my class schedule. "It's like a stalker wall," Kyle said, looking genuinely disturbed. I tried to talk to her about getting help, and she completely flipped out, said I was betraying her just like everyone else. I wasn't sure whether to believe him. It could have been another of Mom's tactics, using Kyle to get information about me. But he seemed sincere, and what he described matched the Mom I'd come to know. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. Kyle shrugged. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know I see it now, and I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner." After Kyle left, I called Dad and told him about the conversation. He was skeptical too, but agreed it was significant that Kyle was breaking ranks. Maybe Mom's support system was finally starting to see through her. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me walking across campus, clearly taken that same day. No message, just the picture. A chill ran down my spine. I called campus security immediately, then Dad, then our lawyer. Everyone said the same thing: document it, be careful, but there wasn't much else we could do unless something more concrete happened. I was getting frustrated. It felt like we were waiting for Mom to do something really dangerous before anyone would take it seriously. Charlie, the security consultant, was the only one who seemed to truly get it. He suggested I start carrying pepper spray and taking different routes to classes each day. The next week, I had a midterm in my economics class. I'd been studying hard, trying to keep my grades up despite all the drama. As I was walking into the exam room, my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. "Catherine knows about your test today. Be careful." I was on edge the entire exam, jumping at every noise, expecting Mom to burst in at any moment. Nothing happened, but I was so distracted I probably bombed the test. Afterward, I checked my phone and found another text from Kyle. She left my place an hour ago, said she had something important to do on campus. I called Dad in a panic. He was already on his way to campus, worried after Kyle's first message. We met at the student center, both of us scanning the crowds nervously. That's when campus security called me. Someone matching Mom's description had tried to access the economics department office, claiming she needed to speak to my professor about a family emergency. Thankfully, the department secretary knew about the restraining order and called security instead of letting her in. By By the time officers arrived, Mom was gone, but it was a clear violation. She'd come to my campus looking for me. Well, within the 500-foot boundary of the restraining order, we went straight to the police station to file a report. This time, they took it more seriously. The campus had security footage of Mom entering the building, and the secretary gave a statement confirming she'd asked specifically about me and my exam. It was the concrete evidence we'd been waiting for. The police issued a warrant for Mom's arrest for violating the restraining order. Kyle called to say she hadn't come back to his place. She wasn't answering her phone either. Part of me was relieved she'd finally face consequences, but another part was worried about what she might do when cornered. 2 days later, the police called Dad. They'd found Mom's car abandoned at a rest stop about 50 miles outside town. No sign of her. They pinged her phone, but it was turned off. Dad and I looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Was this real or another manipulation? The answer came 3 days later when Mom was picked up at a hotel in a neighboring state. She'd used cash, a baseball cap, and sunglasses to avoid detection, but the hotel clerk recognized her from a police bulletin. When officers arrived, she surrendered without resistance. I didn't go to her arraignment. Dad went, texting me updates from the courtroom. Mom pleaded not guilty, claiming she'd only come to campus because she was worried about my health. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Given the restraining order and her subsequent flight, he set bail high and ordered a psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation was the turning point. The psychiatrist diagnosed Mom with a personality disorder characterized by manipulative behavior, lack of empathy, and an inability to accept responsibility. She recommended intensive therapy and possibly medication. Most importantly, she stated clearly in her report that Mom posed an ongoing risk to me and Dad. Mom ended up accepting a plea deal. 6 months of house arrest, followed by 3 years of probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a stricter restraining order that covered electronic contact as well. She would be monitored with an ankle bracelet and wasn't allowed to use social media or email without supervision. It wasn't the dramatic ending I'd imagined, but it gave us something we desperately needed: peace. With Mom under supervision, Dad and I could finally start rebuilding our lives without constantly looking over our shoulders. I stayed in my dorm through the end of the semester, then moved into a small apartment with Joe for sophomore year. Dad found a better job and started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a nice woman from his office. We had dinner together every Sunday, sometimes joined by Rebecca or other family members who'd reconnected with Dad after learning the truth. Kyle kept his distance from Mom during her house arrest, focusing instead on his own therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated for so long. Greg finalized his divorce and moved to another state for a fresh start. I got occasional updates from him, brief but friendly texts checking in. As for me, I switched my major to psychology, fascinated by what I'd learned about manipulation and family dynamics. I started volunteering at a support group for kids of divorce, sharing my experience without the bitterness that had once consumed me. Mom completed her house arrest and continued treatment. Her therapist reported she was making progress, though slowly. She sent me a letter through her lawyer, a genuine apology, according to the therapist who'd supervised its writing. I read it once, then filed it away. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond, but not yet. The last time I saw Mom was at a distance, about a year after everything went down. I was getting coffee with Dad when I spotted her across the street. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. Our eyes met briefly before she turned and walked away, respecting the boundaries that had finally been established. Dad squeezed my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find it was true. The anger was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had my dad back. I had the truth, and for the first time in years, I had control over my own story.